one for us. I hope Steve's going to make it a bit more positive. It's Joshua 10, it's 16 to 27, and then verse 14. It says this. Now the 5 kings had fled and hidden in the cave at Makkedah. When Joshua was told that the 5 kings had been found hiding in the cave at Makkedah, he said, roll large rocks up to the mouth of the cave and post some men there to guard it. But don't stop. Pursue your enemies. Attack them from the rear and don't let them reach their cities, for the Lord your God has given them into your hand. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely, but a few survivors managed to reach their fortified cities. The whole army then returned safely to Joshua in the camp at Makkedah, and no one uttered a word against the Israelites. Joshua said, open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings out to me. So they brought the 5 kings out of the cave, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. When they had brought those kings to Joshua, he summoned all the men of Israel and said to the army commanders who had come with him, come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings. So they came forward and placed their feet on their necks. Joshua said to them, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you are going to fight. Then Joshua put the kings to death and exposed their bodies on 5 poles, and they were left hanging on the poles until evening. At sunset, Joshua gave the order, and they took them down from the poles and threw them into the cave where they had been hiding. At the mouth of the cave, they placed large rocks, which are there to this day. So Joshua subdued the whole region, including the hill country, the Negev, the western foothills, and the mountain slopes, together with all their kings. He left no survivors. He totally destroyed all who breathed, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Steve.
Great. Thanks. You are love and love alone. You are. You are love and love alone. We got a little song. Nathan's been practicing it. We'd like you to sing along. We know you know the words from your days in Sunday school or something like that. It's easy. Here we go.
We have a musical difference of opinion here, right? So if it was Mr. Jones playing, you get the Sunday school version, whereas for me, the version that lives rent-free in my head is the spirituals version. So what I want you to do is join me in the chorus, right? Which goes like this. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down again. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. You may talk about the men of Gideon, you may talk about the men of Saul, but there's none like good old Joshua at the battle of Jericho. All together, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. Up to the walls of Jericho he marched with sword in hand. Go blow those ram horns, Joshua cried, for the battle is in God's hands. Everybody! Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling. One last time. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down.
There you go.
Happy?
And that's how easy it is to con church people, isn't it? He is love and love alone, but perhaps not. Perhaps not. So how do we put all of this stuff together? This Bible here, picture of it behind me, is called the Good Book. People always called the Bible the Good Book. But how good is this book? Winston Churchill's son, Randolph, was fighting in the Second World War for the same company as his father fought for in the First World War. And he found himself eventually holed up in what was then Yugoslavia, one country no longer existing, as we all know. He found himself holed up with his company in a cave, and there was no way out for them safely. They just had to sit it out. He had nothing to read, but he was quite an academic. And one of his friends gave him the Bible. It was the only book they had. They were there for some time. They had some supplies, but they couldn't get out. And so Randolph began reading through the Bible from the beginning. Have you read the Bible all the way through? That's what we say. Are you one of those Christians who's a slacker and not read it all the way through? And Randolph began reading through the Old Testament, the law, and then into the history, these stories that we've just been talking about. And he came to a conclusion that he wrote about in his biography. His conclusion about God was simply this: God is a little shit. The truth is that what Nath just read to us from the good book, from the Bible, doesn't really bear much in common with this little harp that we all made, or the chorus that we sang. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. God's mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning, new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord. Great is thy faithfulness, unless you happen to be a community member of the city of Jericho. This is Joshua chapter 6. We read from chapter 10. This is the story of the defeat of the city of Jericho when the walls came tumbling down. I promise I'll get to. If I don't, someone shout up, "Yeah, I haven't mentioned, did the walls actually come tumbling down?" So say that at the end if I've not said it. But in the Battle of Jericho, when Joshua's army overran the people, we're told in chapter 6, verse 21, they devoted the city to the Lord and they destroyed it. Because in order to devote it to the Lord, you had to destroy it with the sword, every living thing in it, men, women, young and old, cattle, sheep and donkeys, all wiped out. And then from Joshua 10, verse 40, the last verse that Nath read to us, from Jericho, they go on to the people of Israel to defeat other cities. They went to Ai next. Ai, not artificial intelligence, just the name of a city way back then. There's nothing new under the sun, is there? They went from Jericho to Ai. Then they went to Jerusalem, then they went to Hebron, and then they made their way across, slaughtering all those kings that Nathan mentioned, slaughtering them all. And so verse 40 that Nathan read sums it all up. So Joshua defeated the whole land. He left no survivors. He totally destroyed all who breathed, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded him. So what do we make of all of this? And then there's a wider issue, and that's why I asked Nathan to get you to sing Joshua built or won the Battle of Jericho, because I knew everyone would know it. But this morning I found this on the internet. Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho. There are endless little videos lasting between 2 and 3 minutes for Sunday school children, teaching them that Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho and slaughtered everybody who did not serve God. This is what we teach our children in Sunday schools across the country. And this is why so many people abandon their faith in a Christian God when they reach an age where they have to think it through for themselves. And this is just before or just after we teach them the story that Noah took the animals, all species, onto the ark 2 by 2. And we give them little children's books and create models of Noah's Ark with animals coming in and out. And everybody knows that if you put 2 lions on an ark, you need at least 100, you need a herd of wildebeest to feed them for the whole time. How did this man achieve all this? We teach Bible parables, myths is the technical term, as though they're history. And then we teach history, which is what the stories of Joshua are, without context. And we leave children befuddled and adults befuddled. So I know as I look out at you, there's endless of you in this room right now who just can't put all this stuff together. But we somehow limp on with a faith where the bits don't join up because nobody's ever explained to us how the bits joined up. So the question I was asked to talk about by Nathan Rebecca is, did God initiate a genocide? Now, before Joshua came Moses, and this is from Exodus, actually, some verses from Exodus. So from Deuteronomy. When Moses is setting out for the people, remember Moses never reached the promised land. Moses died before that, but he's setting out for the people when they're in the desert, what they ought to do when they get to this promised land, which they're going to conquer. He says, in the cities of the nations, the Lord your God is giving to you as an inheritance. You're nicking them off other people. Do not leave anything alive that breathes. Completely destroy them. And he names the peoples that live there. The Hittites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, as the Lord your God commanded you. So this is all ancient history. When people used God, the name of God, in order to do what they chose. But it's not such ancient history. Here's Putin with his patriarch, Cyril, who endorses Putin's war and slaughter of people in Ukraine. Here's Donald with his Bible, upside down by the way, standing outside a church, endorsed by so many churches across America as he launches on, in this complex world, everything's built on something else before it, another illegal war, which he just chose to do. So, as the Bible's used in all these ways, and by the way, do you know everything from the Roman Empire to the British Empire has used the Bible to justify its goals? The Romans to enslave endless people, that's how we got Roman Catholicism. It was invented by the Roman Empire. It was the version of Christianity for the Roman Empire, Roman Catholicism. But of course, the British Empire, which we've still got vestiges of, was built on propaganda that came through the church. We could enslave black people and take them from their country and use them as our chattel, use them as things, subjugate them, break up their families, get them to breed and then break up families so that no strength was built. And that's never been faced in this country, not really. We've never dealt with it. Cornelia and I, a couple of weeks ago, we went to Berlin for a few days. And one of the things that struck me again about the German people is they have embraced their history. They've not ignored it. They've not sought to sweep it under the carpet. They are dealing with it and continue to deal with it all of the time. They're honest about their failures. They're honest about the racism that swept through Germany in the 20s and into the 30s. They're honest about it. We still aren't honest about so much of this. Oasis, we run 10 schools in Bristol. I don't know if you know, that's all part of what we do together. And there's Black Boys Hill, White Ladies Road, so that the black boys didn't ever have to sadden the white ladies by walking up the same street. I'm not picking on Bristol. It's a city built on tobacco and slavery, as is Liverpool, where we're just beginning to work. And all of this has the Bible at the heart of it. Of course, through the years, the Bible's been used to justify war and slavery, as I've just said. It's been used to subjugate women and take away from them the opportunity to lead. It's been used to oppress the LGBTQ plus community. It's been used to wipe away people's freedom, to put people down on the basis of their religion. And still, just this last week, one of our political parties, Reform UK, announced that it's going to ban the burqa and ban empty church buildings ever being used as mosques. Well, through history, as you know, across the world, churches became mosques and mosques became churches. Some of them are the wonders of the world. You go to see how something was once a church and now a mosque, or once a mosque and it's now a church, because of the moving of populations. All of this that said that statement, which came out on Monday, was to return Britain to true Christianity. You can't return Britain to true Christianity, or get Britain to true Christianity, by exploiting people, by oppressing people, by putting people down. I was on a radio show actually on Monday night. I was just talking to Nicholas about for LBC, and I said, the obvious thing as they were talking about this is that Jesus wasn't a Christian. And Ian Dale, who's the presenter, who's a lovely bloke, he said, well, you're wrong about that. He was the first Christian. I said, no, Ian, you're wrong about that. I remember, you do politics, I do theology. Jesus was a Jew. He was born a Jew. He died a Jew. And he engaged with people as people. He never engaged with people because they were Jews or because they were Gentiles or because they were Christians. Well, there weren't any Christians. Paul wasn't a Christian. The term Christian was invented, of course, much later by people that were hostile to the followers of Jesus, who jeered at them. You're Christians. That's how it came about. All Jesus was a Jew who wanted to live faithfully to a God who he understood to be a God of love and mercy and justice. So how did all this get muddled? So muddled. And why do we have to spend so much of our time cutting and pasting the Bible? One of my great friends through the years, to whom I owe so much, is a guy who died just sadly, not last year, but at the end of the year before, Dr. Tony Campolo. And Tony used to tell me this story, and it was that he and some friends produced a Bible in America called My Bible, and you could go online or whatever, and you could order My Bible, and it came in a wonderful box. My Bible. You could have, there's Bibles for men and youth and women and, all sorts of farmers, all sorts of things, So there was a My Bible, and Tony and gang produced this thing. And it was leather, and it arrived in a box. And on the front, it was just said, My Bible, in this beautiful leather. But when you opened it up, it was completely blank. Page after page with absolutely nothing on it. But what Tony and his friends had done is, underneath the Bible, as you took it out, there was another compartment in the box which had a pair of scissors, little scissors, and some glue and some instructions. And the instructions just said, now you've got My Bible, just take your old Bible, cut out all your favourite verses, and use the glue to stick them into My Bible, so you end up with a Bible with your favourite verses in and nothing else. And that's our problem, isn't it? How do we read the whole Bible authentically and honestly and consistently? Because the Bible does tell us that God commanded Joshua to tell the people to slaughter everyone, including the children and even the animals. That is in the Bible. So if the Bible has no fault in it, if it's pure and non-contradictory, which, by the way, only people who've never read any of it can hold that view. But if it is that, how do we deal with this whole thing? Because we can't cut and paste. We can't remove these verses that we just heard together, remove them. We can try to blot them out every week as we sing about God's love, but they stare us in the face. And they stare everyone in the face who's abandoned Christianity, who's not religious anymore because of all of this stuff. So we've got to deal with these verses as well as all the other verses. Otherwise, we're just like other people who choose the verses we like and not the verses we don't. So here is the key to all of this. The Bible is not a book. It just looks like one. For the last 400 years, well, actually, it's probably since Victorian times that it's looked like a book. It is, in fact, a library. And those of you who read Latin languages, who understand French, will know that Bible means library. And those of you who don't read other languages will know that when you open your Bible and you look at the front page says, these are the books of the library. It's a library. And once you understand the Bible as a book, like some kind of novel, you're going to go very wrong. It's all going to fall apart. Because when you read some J.K. Rowling, what happens is you expect what happens in chapter 23 to be coherent with what you read in chapters 1, 2, and 3. Everything follows, and if it doesn't follow, if it's different, if it doesn't fit, it does your head in, and you go back to chapter 2 and you read it again, you read chapter 23 again, and you think this thing doesn't work. Well, the Bible doesn't work if you read it as a novel, if you read it as a book. The truth is, it's only been the book, it's only been able to be a book since the printing press. And of course, the printing press was the new media for the first 300 years. So it wasn't until Victorian times that the Bible as a book came to be popular and fell into the hands of ordinary people. Who decided which books go in the Bible and which order they go in? Who decided? Shall I tell you what the really spiritual answer is? The printer. That's who it was. It was the printer. When Martin Luther, he's, the original one, not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther was getting the, what we call the Reformation together, or John Calvin, or before him St. Augustine, or Benedict, or Francis, who loved talking to the animals. What did their books look, what did their Bibles look like? Which order did the books come in, and which books were in their Bible? Shall I tell you the truth? We haven't got a clue. Because they had scrolls, not books. The printing press was a thing of the future. So they had the scrolls that they could afford, some of which are now in our Bible and some of which aren't. And which order did they come in? Well, whichever order they put them on the shelf in the evening. Which books did they have? The ones they could afford. That's the way it's been. But it was, why did Martin Luther, that we talked about, I'm sure some of you know this, he said that the book of James was a strawy epistle. Do some of you know that? He wished it wasn't in the Bible. Yeah? Imagine me, I get in trouble for a lot of things, but if I stood up and said, I think the book of Romans is a pile of poo and it shouldn't be in the Bible, that would be the last straw. But that's what Martin Luther said about James and various other books in the New Testament, actually. Why? Because at the time he lived, in the 1500s, the Bible hadn't been brought together in the way that we now have it. It was when the Protestants the printer rang up the Protestants and said, what do you want in it, in what order? They had to decide. And when the Catholics made their decision, it was a slightly different one, which is why when we say, I really believe the Bible, the first thing to say, well, do you mean the Protestant one or the Catholic one? Because the Catholic one's got more books than the Protestant one. And you can read the other one around the corner if you go there in that wonderful cathedral. And then there's the Orthodox one, and there's several Orthodox Bibles, and the longest Bible in the world, do you know what it is? It's the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, which has got 84 books, and we've only got 66 books. So what is the Bible? It's a library. It's a library. That's what it is. And when you go into a library, you don't expect every book to be saying the same thing. And what's the point in going? If you've got one book of biology, human biology, well then stick with one book. You go to the library because you want to study more deeply. You go to the library because you need different opinions and views, etc. You go to the library because you know a book written in 1950 will be brilliant, but say different things to a book written in 1970 or 2010 or 2020, because understanding is advancing, but because different opinions and different schools of thought really help us. When you look at the Bible, it's exactly that. The compilers of the canon understood that the different books in the library of the Bible spoke with different voices and expressed different views. If you read just the history of Israel, the history books of Israel, because they're written by different people with different political views, all of the time. So Samuel, the book of Samuel and the books of Kings have a different outlook to some of the other history books. And you'll hear the same story talked about from a completely different angle. There's a story. Hi guys. There's a story. There's a story. There's a wonderful family scooting out. There you go. So all of this is what the Bible is. And through the years, God gets caught up in this. So why does God order the killing of people? Well, the truth is this, that we interpret God through our own understanding of life. When I was a student, I was 21, 22. I had absolutely no money. Corny and I had started going out with each other, and I just prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed that God would give me a car. And sure enough, he did. It was fantastic. Cornelia can tell you all about it. It was a Triumph Herald. It was fantastic, you know what then? But my Triumph Herald wasn't a good one. It had a hole in the floor. It had the door. Cornelia used to sit on one side of the car when we used to go out, and the door used to fly open. So every time we went round a corner, the door that nearest her would fly open, and she'd get in danger of falling out. So what I did is I used to tie a rope, didn't I, Cornelia? I used to tie this rope from the door handle round the gear stick to stop the door flying open when we went round a corner to the right. That's the way it was. This car drank more oil than petrol. It really did. Every time I filled it up with petrol, I also filled it up with oil. But I believed that God had given me this. Do you believe that God gives someone now a car that drinks more oil than petrol and pollutes the streets of London? Our ideas change. The only reason that King Charles is king is because the church held the view before that a divorcee couldn't be the monarch of the country. Changed their mind. The Church of England advised the Parliament that this couldn't happen based on the Bible. But now, based on the Bible, we've got a different view. We'd have a completely different line of succession if the church didn't change its mind about what the meaning of the Bible is. Does that make sense to you? So how do we make our way through all of this horrific slaying and genocide, undoubted genocide in the Old Testament? And by the way, in the New Testament, it crops up again, doesn't it? In the New Testament, still slavery is held up to be a good thing. Slaves, obey your masters. Slavery is still a thing that's endorsed by the Bible. Women, in verses in the New Testament, still can't speak. Keep them silent until they get home, we're advised. So, the Bible, for a good book, isn't that great unless you understand it as a library. And it is a library. And what is actually happening is slowly people's views and understanding of who God is are developing. As Rebecca read to us in the prayers, God made us in God's image. But that's all of us. But that's soon lost. The only way to understand the Bible is through the lens of Jesus, who brings clarity. And this isn't my idea, by the way. This is what the Bible itself says. Hebrews, book in the New Testament. In the past, God spoke to us through spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son, the exact representation of his being. So through the Bible, some mistaken ideas get put forward. Joshua's understanding of God reflects an ancient pre-Christian understanding of divine judgment. And divine judgment under Jesus turns out to be about divine love. Judgment, by the way, is a good thing to oppressed people. If you're being wrongly accused, you wait for a judge to stand up for you. You wait for a righteous judge to tell the truth, to liberate you. You want your day in court. The day of the judgment of the Lord isn't something to be feared. It's something to set us free, because God's judgment of us is love and just. I don't know if you've ever been to the Louvre. Have you? Have you been to the Louvre and seen this painting? The Mona Lisa? Who's been to see the Louvre in the right? Keep your hands up if you go again. Keep your hands up if you'd love to go again because you think it was so brilliant. Put your hand up if you were slightly disappointed. Everyone who went. Yeah, there you go. But here's the good news for you. Well, it's bad news unless you get to go again. When you went to see the Mona Lisa, which was slightly disappointing to you all, right? You were just a 3-minute walk away from an actual wonder of the world, right? You really were. And when I've shown you it, you're going to want to go and see it. It is this. It's 3 minutes in the Louvre Gallery from where the Mona Lisa is, and it looks like that. You're impressed? Not. But you will be when I tell you what it is. It's called a stele. It's just over 6 feet high, and it's a piece of stone. And it's called the Code of Hammurabi. Hammurabi was the king of Babylon who lived 500 years before Moses. And over this piece of stone, here's a close-up of some of it, in cuneiform are written loads of laws. They actually did write laws on stones. I mean, they actually did it. When Moses wrote laws on stones, he was doing it 500 years after Hammurabi, the leader of Babylon, the superpower, had done exactly the same thing. And if you could all read cuneiform, I take it that no one can in here, you'd see that one of the laws in the middle that you're looking at there says this is 500 years before Moses. It actually says in English, if a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. If he breaks a man's bone, they shall break his bone. If one destroys the eye of a freeman, however, or breaks the bone of a freeman, he shall just pay 1 manner of silver. If one destroys the eye of a man's slave, or breaks the bone of a man's slave, he should just pay half his price. There you go. 500 years before Moses, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a bone for a bone, it was all said. So when Moses stands up, having got down the mountain and says in Exodus, you are to take a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, a bruise for a bruise. Everyone goes, we know that. Like Hammurabi said that half a millennia ago. You know that, Moses. Well, you all know that. That's the deal. So it's not what Moses says, it's what he doesn't say. What is the difference between this and that? The difference is that the punishment is graded. If you take the eye of a civilian, you get your eye taken. If you take the eye of a freedman, that's somebody who was once a slave but's now set free, well, you just pay a big fine. But if you take the eye of somebody who's still in slavery, you pay a small fine. So when Moses gets it, they all know he's going to say that, and then they're waiting for, yeah, but what are the degradations of that? You know, what's the cheap deal for when I kind of kick my slave's face in? And Moses says, there's no cheap deal. There's equality in this. This is still about retribution, but it's about equality. But here comes the thing. Jesus rocks up and he says this, "A new command I give to you, love one another as I've loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know you're my disciples if you love one another. You've heard it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You've heard that from Moses and Hammurabi before. But I tell you, do not resist the evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." Here's the thing. Why does the old bits of the Old Testament, not the whole Old Testament, have such genocidal, aggressive, violent text and thoughts? Because that was the level of moral integrity back then. Moses lived in the Bronze Age. We often talk about the Bible as though it's disassociated from world history. Moses was a Bronze Age person with Bronze Age thoughts. Every book in the Bible is important because it's inspired by God and it's slowly pushing forward people's understanding. Moses slowly pushes forward the understanding that came from Hammurabi because he drops the kind of, but if it's a slave, but if it's a freeman bit, and he says it's about equality, but it's still about retribution. It's slowly moving forward. By the end of the Old Testament, what we call the the prophets, God is about love and mercy. What he wants is justice, not your sacrifice. The Psalms talk about the never-ending love of God, but they come a long time after this history because slowly, the moral understanding of humanity is growing and it's being chased along and driven by the dawning understanding that's written into these different books. So once you understand the Bible as a library, you say, this is about the moral progress of humanity slowly. Nothing is hidden, no dirt is shoved under the carpet. This just continues as humanity moves forward. And then comes Jesus. And in Jesus, as we just read from Hebrews, we see God as God is for the first time. Or as John says, the Word became flesh and we have seen the truth and the grace of all of this. So, as I finish, the process of biblical interpretation is still ongoing because the Bible isn't, even the New Testament. It's not the last word on the liberation of women, is it? For sure. It's not the last word on the liberation of LGBT people. It's not clear there. It's not the last word. It's not the last word about the ending of slavery and oppression. It's not the last word about the sharing of wealth instead of the hoarding of wealth by 10% of the country who own 51% of our wealth, rather than sharing this equally. It's not the last word. So the process of biblical interpretation, it's ongoing, it's open-ended, it's a global project for all of us who take the Bible seriously. You can't read one verse and say, that's it. You've got to understand the context. You've got to work at all of this hard. And in this, the Holy Spirit guides us together, not me, not you, us in our conversation as we wrestle with what it means to understand Scripture through the process of ongoing, open and honest dialogue. And our understanding of the Bible will evolve and will keep evolving. Has your understanding of the Bible evolved any much in the last 5 years? Yeah? Do you hope to learn anything in the next 5 years, or would you like to just be exactly as you are in 5 years' time, what you are today? Of course you want to grow. So it's going to evolve. Our understanding does grow. We will not always agree about anything. If you have a church filled with people like you, you'll be on your own at the front and there'll be no one else there. Every family is built on the same, in the same way. We will not always agree, but here comes the key point. When we disagree over our understanding of the Bible, we will continue to extend grace and patience to one another. Why? Because we're included in the family of God's people, not because of how right we are, but because God graciously and mercifully accepts us. Sometimes, often, in fact, in spite of the positions we adopt. Is that not true? And if we are understood and welcomed like that, then others deserve that too. The Bible is not all a good book. Some of it, as we just read, Nath read to us, is bad. And it's been used for bad stuff by empires through the ages. What the Bible is an honest book, or to put it more accurately, an honest library. And I said as I finished, I mentioned, because Rebecca said it, so did the walls of Jericho actually come tumbling down because people marched round it for 7 days in a row? Well, they must have been pretty pathetic walls if they fell in. You know, you can march round those old walls of the City of London, at the Tower of London, as much as you like, and they're not going to fall over. Do you know, have you ever come across politicians who use facts for propaganda purposes? I know it never happens now, but it used to happen then. We do it still. My God is a great big God. Our God is all powerful. He holds us in his hands. Another children's song. That's not what the Bible says. It was a piece of rhetoric, because if you were the Israelites and you were going up against the Perizzites, you want to say, our God is more muscle bound than your God. Our God is more muscle bound than Zeus. Our God is the biggest, beefiest God there's ever been. Whoa, ho, ho. And you use that to encourage people in war. So you tell stories about ultimate triumphs. Did the walls of Jericho absolutely, literally fall flat? I very much doubt it myself, but I do believe that these people ran riot through the people of Jericho and slaughtered them. And in the propaganda that surrounds it, and a slight bit of exaggeration, and the turning of hyperbole into literalistic truth before it's recorded, you end up with, and our walls were squashed flat by our guys, and our God's the biggest. But we've sung that our God has the biggest love. That is the truth that Jesus brings for the first time. God bless you.
Thank you, Steve. Let's stand if you're able. We're going to sing together to finish. Let